Hey everyone, welcome back to the Mass Retirees Weekly Update. Today's Friday, February 3rd. I'm Sean Duhamel. Thank you so much for tuning in and joining with us again this week. Now, before I get started with this week's topic, which is the Social Security WEP GPO, let me first thank those of you who joined with us this week in Pompano Beach at the Pompano Beach Civic Center for our first area meeting in Florida since the pandemic began in March of 2020. As a matter of fact, we were in Florida during that time in March of 2020 when the nation went into lockdown. We haven't been able to safely hold a meeting in the Sunshine State since. So it felt like a victory, to be completely honest with you, to be back down there, to meet with our members, to see folks face to face once again. As Frank has said, and I have said in the past, it's one of the best parts of this job is meeting with you and seeing you and just having that personal interaction. These videos are great. They're a great communications tool, and our teletown halls have been very successful. But there really is no replacement for seeing folks face to face and being able to be there in the same room with people. Now, going forward, we are going to look at options to expand the meetings we have in Florida, to try to get to some new locations. I know we had a few members drive down to see us in Pompano, spent more than 3 hours in the car. We deeply appreciate that, but it's a clear indication that we need to look at other locations in Florida to hold our meetings, whether it's in the greater Orlando area or other locations. So we will be keeping you abreast of those developments. Now, all of our meetings are going to be announced on page 3 of the newsletter. It's our events calendar. Always look to the newsletter for full information on upcoming Mass Retirees events, whether they be area meetings or our teletown halls, which, a matter of fact, we have a teletown hall coming up with Unicare on March 17th. Now, speaking of Unicare, I also want to thank Sue Tiffany and David Morales, the general manager of Unicare. Sue Tiffany took the time on Friday. She happened to be in the Pompano Beach area. She knew we were holding a meeting. She came over to the meeting and was on hand to answer questions from our members who are living down in Florida, who may be facing some changes with health insurance benefits, who are non-Medicare retirees. So we deeply appreciated Sue taking the time out of her personal schedule to come by the meeting and step forward and be there for our members. And it just shows you the type of dedication that's really exists from the various vendors and insurance companies like Unicare, and Blue Cross Blue Shield is the same way. They really go out of their way to be there for public retirees, and it certainly doesn't go unnoticed. So once again, thank you so much for helping out this week. Now, in terms of the news of the week, as I mentioned in last week's video, I want to provide a little bit of an update, just briefly, on where things stand with the Social Security windfall elimination provision and the government pension offset. Now, I'm not going to get into every detail today. The email message that came out from me this morning along with this video, and if you're a Mass Retirees member, as long as we have your email address, you should be receiving the weekly updates that come from me every Friday morning. In addition to today's email message, we have also published an editorial from Frank Valeri and myself that will appear in the March edition of The Voice, which is at the printer right now as I speak. Members should start to receive the March Voice in about 10 days. So we will have full information within the Voice as well, which of course goes to every member. But the long and short of it is we are still very disappointed and quite honestly angry at the fact that Congress failed to act on WEP reform before the end of 2022. It wasn't for a lack of effort. We know without a doubt that our members and retirees from across the country went out of their way to do everything possible to advocate that Congress take some action to alleviate those retirees who are affected by the WEP from such a substantial hit. Now, unfortunately, the Congress failed to act. As we have reported, Congressman Brady and Congressman Neal were unable to reach a compromise that would have allowed WEP reform to be passed through the House and over into the Senate and ultimately onto President Biden's desk. And again, we are very disappointed. We know you are too. Now, the first message I want to make sure that everyone's crystal clear on is that we are not giving up on this issue. I know that some of you have reached out and you're disappointed, you're upset, and you've suggested that perhaps we should just throw in the towel, that things are never going to change, so why even bother trying? Well, that's not the approach that this association has ever taken, going all the way back to our founding in 1968. We are here to serve our members, we are here to represent your interests, and we're going to do everything humanly possible to find a way to fix not only the WEP, but also the government pension offset, which disproportionately affects women, particularly widows. These two laws combined cause great financial hardship for nearly 2 million retirees across the country. About 100,000 retirees here in Massachusetts are affected by the WEP alone. And these numbers are only going to grow as active public employees retire and begin to collect their Social Security benefit. So this problem isn't going away. It's only going to get worse. And we're not going to give up. We're not going to throw in the towel. Again, that's not how this association was formed. That's not been our approach ever. And our founding president, our former president, Ralph White, would never forgive Frank and myself and the rest of our team here at Mass Retirees if we gave up on something as important as WEP and GPO. But that being said, it is quite obvious that we need to find a more viable path forward to actually getting something done on this. If Neil and Brady, who are close allies, even though one's a Republican and one's a Democrat, if they couldn't agree on the minuscule differences that they had at the 11th hour for WEP reform, it's obvious that a new strategy is necessary. Now, unfortunately, we do not anticipate much congressional action taking place over the next 2 years. It's already pretty clear just from watching what's been taking place in Washington and the extreme partisanship that continues to exist on Capitol Hill and the infighting that's taking place within the Republican Party, who now have control of the House of Representatives. It is very clear that not much in terms of legislative activity will likely take place over the next couple of years. More directly, when it comes to Social Security and the WEP and the GPO, we have a new chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee. It's Congressman Jason Smith. He is from the state of Missouri. He is a 42-year-old congressman. We do not specifically know his views on WEP and GPO, but what we do know is that Congressman Smith did not sign on to either Congressman Brady's WEP reform bill or Congressman Neal's WEP reform bill or H.R. 82, which was the full repeal legislation for both WEP and GPO. Congressman Smith did not sign on to any of those bills. So from what we understand, he does not support full repeal of WEP and GPO, and we don't even know if he supports reform of either of these laws, but it's something that we're working to try to ascertain what his position might be. But the Republican majority in the House, it will be very unlikely that they are going to act on any legislation that adds additional expenses and debt to the Social Security system. More likely than not, we're going to find ourselves in a position over the next couple of years where we're having to defend both Social Security and Medicare from cuts that certain members of the Republican Party on the extreme right wing are targeting both of these programs for cuts to save money. Now, we do not know what these specific cuts might be, other than just in a general sense of some of the talking points that we've heard on TV and read about in the newspapers, where some members of the Republican Party, not all, but some, are indicating that they would like to see cost reductions or cuts take place with both of these programs. And we will be reporting the full details and the facts of what is being proposed in the coming weeks and months as some of these issues are flushed out. But what is clear again is that we do not anticipate really any viable path forward for whether it be reform or certainly not full repeal. So where does that leave us? Well, quite honestly, we now believe that the only way that WEP and GPO will be addressed is through a larger reform of the Social Security system, which is coming sooner rather than later. You're most likely going to hear a lot of talk, and you may have already heard talk, about the so-called solvency of the Social Security system. Now, what is meant by solvency is having enough money in any given year coming into the Social Security system through the federal payroll tax to cover the cost of benefits paid out to retirees in that given year. Now, the Social Security actuary now reports that the system will become insolvent and only have approximately 2/3 of the funds needed to pay benefits in 2035. But in 2027, we begin to see Social Security starting to run a deficit, not having enough money to pay 100% of all claims without having to rely on general tax revenues coming from the federal government. So while we do not anticipate any action taking place during the 2023 and 24 session, it is most likely and necessary that after the next presidential election in 2024, starting with the congressional session in January of 2025, that there will be a desperate need for Congress to take action to reform and shore up Social Security for the current generation as well as for future generations. Now, the last time we saw this type of activity take place in regard to Social Security was in the early 1980s, that resulted in the Social Security Reform Act of 1983 being passed. Now, 40 years ago, believe it or not. The Social Security Reform Act, of course, included the creation of both the WEP and the GPO, and it began a 40-year quest to try to either repeal or change these laws. Now, what we are going to focus on in the immediate future, along with our national allies that include the Texas retired teachers and others, is to try to regroup, first of all, and find a viable path forward to make meaningful changes to the WEP and the GPO together, whether it be through repeal, which again we believe is highly unlikely, even through national reform of Social Security. It's still going to be a very tough sell to get Congress to fully repeal the WEP and the GPO. However, we do fully believe that the opportunity is going to be there to reform both of these benefits that would lead to more money being put in the pockets of current retirees, along with fixing these two laws for future generations. But at the end of the day, the bottom line is we're not giving up. We're going to continue to fight. We're going to continue to work and push forward and find a way to get this done on behalf of our members. I know it's frustrating. I know you're angry, and you have every reason in the world to feel that way. But we're not going to give up on you or on these issues. They're just too darn important. We will have more to say on this in the coming weeks and months. We're going to have more to say, of course, on Social Security and on Medicare. As the facts are known going forward of what is being proposed, we're going to give you all the details on that. So stay tuned. Thank you so much for everything that you have done to keep these issues alive and to support our efforts. We could not do this without you. I know, again, I keep repeating myself on this, but it's important. We're not going to give up. So again, thank you for tuning in this week. We will be back again next week with more information about your health insurance and your pension and all of the success that we're having here in Massachusetts when it comes to the cost of living adjustment. But in the meantime, stay warm if you're here in the New England area. It's going to be cold these next couple of days, extremely cold. So please stay warm, protect yourselves. If you're elsewhere around the country, I hope you're doing well as well. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.